So while I try to finish editing about 10 other videos, I thought I'd give my quick thoughts on The Last Voyage of the Demeter, the recent adaptation of Bram Stoker's Dracula. Stoker or Stroker? I don't remember. Now, this movie has not been garnering a lot of praise, nor has it really been talked about that much, and it really wasn't building up to its release either. For as far as reviews go, they're relatively mixed. I think critics are more on the negative side and audiences are more on the positive side, but they are pretty split. And it's not like this movie's making up for it in box office returns, as $13.6 million domestically at the time of this recording, $8 million internationally, adding up to about $21.6 million for a movie that had a budget of about $45 million. At least I'm pretty sure that's what I saw. So, and I bet considering a lot of you on the channel probably know that I'm not the biggest fan of horror movies. In fact, I despise the genre quite a bit. So you're probably all expecting me to really tear this movie to shreds. But I don't know what people are talking about. This movie's actually really good. Is it perfect? Of course not. But there is actually a lot to like about this film. Now, it's interesting in the fact that it adapts only one chapter from Dracula, the Captain's Logs. And I want to get into that for a second because this movie starts off... I'm going to be going into spoilers a lot because this movie's been out for about a month now. And although something I will say before I actually start talking about it, I think this movie probably would have played better if it had come out in October instead of in August. I still don't understand that. Same thing happened with Disney's Haunted Mansion. Maybe wait until October to release instead of releasing it in the middle of July. Just a thought. Maybe it would have played a bit better. Because Haunted Mansion was another one. It's like it wasn't good, but it was fine. It's one of the better Disney movies of the past few years. I'll give it that. But it immediately starts off in medias res, which means the start of the movie takes place at the end of the movie. And it starts by them finding the captain's logs, and essentially the entire story is them, even though we never cut back to this, it's framed like them reading the captain's log, which would then be essentially telling the story of the movie, but we never cut back to this. Not even at the actual end of the movie, we never see the guys who find the captain's log ever again. So I'm not sure why they decided to start the movie out this way, because it amounts to nothing. And also the fact that the captain's log in the book itself is clearly printed and not handwritten, and that's obviously not how a captain's log works. Especially printing did not exist, especially not on a boat in... When the hell does this take? I don't remember when this takes place, but printing was not a thing at the time, so you figure that out. And we clearly see him writing in it with a quill later on, or a pen, or whatever you want to call it, later on in the movie, so I'm not sure why this looks printed. But that's a relative minor issue. The biggest strength of this movie is surprisingly the performances. Normally in movies like this, I can find at least one performance that's a little off, or somebody that had a lot of line deliveries that could have used an extra take. But everybody seems on point in this movie. The guy who plays Clemens is extremely good. There's the guy from Ant-Man, the Russian guy from the first two Ant-Man movies. I can't remember anybody's name. I saw this movie a couple days ago, so it's not exactly fresh in my memory, so a lot of people's names I'm not going to remember. The captain is played by Liam Cunningham, I believe is the guy's name, and he's extremely good. Surprisingly enough, the kid isn't annoying. And the performance is actually really good. Usually in movies like this, again, the kid isn't a good actor, or he's annoying, or something of the like. But he's actually very likable and very believable. And so is the rest of the crew as well, including Anna, the woman who essentially was stored on board by Dracula as a means to feed while he waits to get to England. And I was trying to see if there's any other notable cast, but bottom line, the rest of the cast does extremely well. Everybody's believable, and there's never a point where one of the crew members becomes extremely antagonistic. There's never a point where it seems like they are intentionally... I'm trying to think of a way to explain this. There's never a point where the crew members turn on each other, which I actually like. It's a refreshing change of pace, because that always happens in these movies. A lot of these movies end up turning into Among Us, where somebody dies and everybody starts accusing everybody else. And that does happen a little bit at first, obviously, because they obviously don't know that fucking Dracula's on board. They don't even know who Dracula is until Anna wakes up. But I like that they ditch that aspect pretty quickly. And the design of Dracula, I'm kind of torn on. Now, he does fit the book description, because I haven't read the full book of Dracula, but I did read the Captain's Log chapter in preparation for this film. And I will say one thing that's odd is that they changed the dates of certain events. Like, I believe, like, the first person's supposed to go missing on September 16th, and they made it September 18th. Not sure what the hell that added to the story, but okay. But the design of Dracula does kind of represent the book, where we're a incredibly tall, like, thin, almost non-human looking creature. But there's a certain point where it kind of looks silly every once in a while. The cool thing about it, one of the cool things that happens is, like, right before someone dies, whenever they, like, say something, he'll, like, repeat, like, that's, like, his only dialogue is him repeating what people say right before they die. It's cooler in the movie than I'm making it sound. And the only time he speaks any words on his own is during the final battle when he has Clemens, and Clemens says, "I don't fear you." And the only lines that Dracula says that aren't repeating what someone else says is, "You will." And and that was definitely pretty cool. It was actually pretty intimidating. But when he does the obvious screeching sounds that you hear from every other movie monster that looks like this, it gets pretty silly, especially from how high-pitched the screeches were. It became a point like, okay, you're starting to lose me here. But it's helped by the fact that the movie is actually legitimately suspenseful. There's a lot, even though you know that everybody is going to die, well, sort of, I'll get back to that in a second. Even though you know pretty much everybody's going to die, it's still pretty suspenseful. You're wondering who's going to die and when. But yeah, this movie does kind of spit in the face of the book a little bit, because everybody on that ship is supposed to be dead, yet Clemens ends up surviving. But they try to get around that by having him not actually be on the boat when it crashes to shore, and he eventually gets to England as well. And the ending of this movie, I think I'm trying to... Okay. So, the ending of this movie is basically Clemens is basically devoting his life to hunting down and killing Dracula. So, is this movie trying to imply... I could be wrong, I could just be spitballing here, but the way the ending was framed, it almost made it look like Clemens is supposed to be Van Helsing. I could be wrong, but that's how I perceive the ending, which, again, kind of spits in the face of the book, because that is definitely not the backstory of Abraham Van Helsing. I was going to talk about something else, and there's a couple times where people actually do become vampires, and it is pretty cool, like, actually watching them getting burned from the sun. That actually kind of took me by surprise the first time. I'm like, oh yeah, that's how, I'm like, oh yeah, vampires are sensitive to sunlight. I completely forgot about that. Thank you for that, Twilight. But I've completely had forgotten about that until it happened the first time, and it happens a few times. Unfortunately, there are kind of dumb moments that require, mostly because it's of the character's decisions. Like, some bad things happen because the characters are kind of stupid. Especially when it comes to Toby, the kid's death. Now, he takes forever to start calling for help. He eventually does, and when everybody gets to the door where one of the other guys who's a vampire now, who's essentially being possessed by Dracula, he's trying to kill the kid, he's, like, broken a hole through the door, and then actually Dracula gets in the room himself once they, like, find and tie up the crew member. Not really tie him up, one of the Russian dude, the Ant-Man guy, like, hold him down. And it takes him forever, and the captain tries to get in the room, like, constantly hitting the doors, not doing anything. Clemens finally tries to reach the hole to get to the lock, which obviously he can't reach. And then they spend, like, an entire minute and a half trying to do it before Anna shows up and finally shoots the fucking door open. Yeah, obvious choice is obvious here, guys. Just shoot the fucking door open. What are they going to do against Dracula? I don't know, but they don't either, so they're just trying to get in the room. And then after Toby is dead, the captain obviously sees him move when he's underneath the tarp that they wrapped him up in because they're going to bury him out at sea, and he stupidly pulls it back. And obviously he set ablaze and the reason this is a stupid decision is because they already saw this happen. If they didn't see it happen to the other crew member already, maybe this would have made a bit more sense, but they already know what this thing can do to its victims, so why did you even try? And also, what is the relationship between the captain and Toby? Like, the way it's done and the way it's written would make me think he's his son, but he's a little too old to have a son that's 8 years old, and it's never, and even if it is, fine, but it's never explained. But all in all, I still had fun with this movie. It's not overly long, it's about 2 hours, I think, but it's still it's almost 2 hours on the dot. According to this, it's 1:58. But I would say at least give it a one-time watch, because it is an entertaining movie. It's not exactly high art, but it'll give you a fun 2 hours. And again, I probably won't watch it again. Maybe I'll watch it one more time. Maybe I'll watch it for Halloween. Who knows? But yeah, I definitely recommend checking this out. I'm going to give Last Voyage of Demeter a B. So that's all I got, and I will see y'all next time. Bye.